was how do I make life better for the folks that work in my company. I got involved in global mission work then. I took my kids all over the world. We were just talking about the Middle East. I went to Iraq, I went to Haiti, I went to Africa, I went to Mexico, and worked with nonprofit agencies and ministries that were helping people that were struggling in those communities. And I got a lot of great satisfaction out of that. That led me into nonprofit work. I got involved in nonprofit work, all the while running my company. And I had a couple of really poignant experiences of nonprofit work that that really impacted me and caused me to start thinking about public service. And even though I've never been involved in public service, never been involved in politics or government, but I chaired the YMCA in Middle Tennessee, and that's the third largest Y in the country. It's a big Y. And while I was in that leadership role, I was involved in their inner city ministry. And I met a kid one day, Adam, and he was 12. And my interaction with him at Little Lunch was meaningful, and it caused me to kind of want to spend some time with him. So I went home and told Maria, there's this kid in the program and I want to spend some time with him. And so I started driving into the projects in urban Nashville and picking this kid up once a week and spending the evening with him every week. And I still do it. He's 17 now. And his situation has all changed. But that encounter with that young man for that period of time in the inner city, it changed me and it changed him. But what it really did, one way it changed me was it opened my eyes up to really the destructive nature of a bad education and the powerful force of good education. And he was in a really poor performing school and he was failing every grade and every class. And I moved him from one public school into another kind of public school, and his educational trajectory totally changed. And I found myself not so much, I moved him from a public school into a charter school, and I found myself not so much thinking that charter school was the answer, but that where he came from was not the answer. And that we, in this state, our children deserve better public education than we've been giving them. And so my interest about, and we can talk about that later, but my interest in public education led me to be on the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. And that's where I started watching public policy get made by just regular people like me that were passionate about a subject like public education. I had a similar experience through a nonprofit that I was involved in. It's a prison ministry. It's a re-entry program, is really what it is. And so they intervene with men. It's called Men of Valor. And they intervene men about a year before they're released from prison. And they programming with them in the prison. And then they connect them with a guy like me who mentored a man as he came out of prison. And they do, it's workforce development work they do with them, and anger management, and parenting classes, and discipleship. It's a faith-based organization. And then they do transitional housing and job placement. And that organization has a 16% recidivism rate as opposed to 60 in this state. And I became very interested in public policy around corrections and public safety and law enforcement, and I expressed that passion and began to go down that trail, and that landed me on a task force for recidivism and sentencing reform. And I was the only lay person on that committee. It was mostly judicial and law enforcement and parole officers. And that was about a year-long work in which we began to develop public policy that would end up being legislation. And it was fascinating work for me. And it was very exciting to me because what I found in that committee, I worked on that for a year, and I sat back and watched and said, you know what, this is about leadership, it's about passion, it's about normal, regular, everyday people working on issues that will change thousands of people's lives and save taxpayers millions of dollars if we do this right. And as I watched that unfold, I started thinking, and you know what? That's true about education, it's true about public safety, it's true about any issue across this state. It's about leadership, and it's about passion, and it's about putting the right people in the right place and applying, you know, principles and values and conservative approaches to issues that we have for this state. And it was moving to me. It caused me to really start thinking, hey, this public policy work is something I might be interested in doing. So I told Maria, and we on January 1st of 15, I said, I'm going to pray about this every day. And I suspect by the end of the year, I'll know whether or not this is something that I'm supposed to do. And we did, and I did. And on November 10th of that year, I knew. And I really began to think, you know, I've spent most of my working career, certainly the last 17 or 18 years, thinking about how my life could be used to make my 1,000 employees' life better. And I started thinking, what would it be like if my life was used to make life better for 6.5 million people? And that was a really compelling thought for me. And I thought, I'm not sure I can do that, but what if my career and my adversity challenges and overcoming adversity, coupled with my passion for education and public safety and my knowledge of creating jobs, what if those things, coupled with my perspective that my life was to be spent to make life better for other people, if that all coupled together and was brought to bear in public service, that would be, that might be a profoundly meaningful way to spend my life. And so when we heard, we made a decision, and we traveled the state for a year before actually definitively making a decision and announcing. But on the 24th of April, we did. We announced that I was running for governor, and after doing a lot of due diligence to make sure that was something that we felt like could happen, and we decided to buy that old RV, and we are going to 95 counties in 95 days. And we're going to meet people, and we're on County 51, and we're going to meet people in every county and listen to their, I have a vision for the state. Let me say, on the side of our bus there's a scripture reference, Psalm 71. And that scripture says, but as for me, I will always have hope. And I found that in the darkest days of my life, but I've carried it ever since. And now, for me, what it is translating into hope for Tennessee. It's hope for what we can be. It's hope for what we still have and can preserve. It's hope for what we don't yet have and can attain. And I have a lot of hope for this state. The more I travel, the more people I meet, the more hope I become. At my company, we say that hope is not a strategy, and it's not. It's what fuels the creation of a strategy. And so we're trying to develop a strategy right now. We're spending these 95 days listening to people. And I don't have all the answers. And I don't have everything tied down. I tell people, hey, just 2 months ago I was running an HVAC and plumbing company. And now I'm running for governor. But we're developing a strategy for where we want this state to be. And I'll say this, and then there's a lot more for me to say, but I'll let it come out through questions. But when we were trying to discern whether or not this was something we should do, I decided I wanted to visit the 15 poorest counties in Tennessee. We actually have 19 federally designated distressed counties in the state. And so I went to those counties and visited with those county mayors because we have great prosperity in the state. We have a lot of things going in the right direction, but we have 19 counties that are struggling, and they should be. And there are things that we can do. So I went there and I met this one particular county mayor in Van Buren County. He was a strong believer, and we hit it off just personally. And I told him then, I said, if I ever run for governor, I'm going to come back to Van Buren County. And so we did decide to run. And on day one of our RV tour, our first stop was Van Buren. And we went to this, it's one of the smallest counties, the poorest counties. Not a lot of votes there. There's not a lot of money there for campaigns, but there was a group of people that were sitting in a little, building there, just waiting for us to show up on day one, excited that we were coming. And I walked into that room, and I told Maria later, I said, I went to Van Buren County because I want to be reminded of why I'm running for governor. Because the people in that room, regular, everyday, hardworking folks who live in a struggling county, they care a lot who governs. And it matters a lot to them, the motives behind that person that is governing. And they're hopeful that somebody will care about Van Buren County, will care about, just like they do about every other county in the state. And it was very inspiring. It kind of set the tone for the rest of our tour. And we try to meet with a county sheriff and county mayors and leaders of grassroots organizations and farmers and business leaders and educators throughout the state to hear their heart for their community, to kind of backfill this vision that we have for the state. We have decided that no matter where you go, no matter what county you're in, or whether you're in Memphis or Unicoi County or right here, people want a good job, and they want a good school for their kid, and they want a safe neighborhood. And that's kind of it. And there are a lot of other things that weigh into those. That's the American dream for people. And the American dream for my little inner city boy, it's not to live like me. It's to live his version of that. But that includes a good job, and a good school for his kid, and a safe neighborhood. And my ex-offender that I'm still hanging out with every week, his version is different than mine too. But that good school, good job, good safe neighborhood is what a governor ought to be thinking about. And it's what he ought to provide access for to every single person that lives in the state. And that would be when people talk about, hey, what's your platform and what's your interest and that's it. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. So there are a lot more issues and a lot more questions than that, but that's my focus, and that's my heart, and that's why we're doing it. And we're committed because we're being obedient to something, and meanwhile we're having a great time doing it. And it's not all going to be fun, and it's not all going to be whatever, but when you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then it's kind of like when you like what you do for work, and you can get up and do it every day. And I like what I'm doing for work right now. And part of it is doing what we're doing here right now, which is being able to share our heart and then listen to yours. So thank you very much for having me. Thanks for your gracious attentiveness, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Hi, sir. I'm Fred. I'm a Second Amendment activist and a member of the Tennessee Firearms Association and a member of Governors of America. And not to be rude, I frankly don't care if you hunt fish. My question is about constitutional carry or permitless carry. My question is, can a man defend himself without permission from Nashville in Tennessee? And would you actively push the legislature to pass constitutional carry, so-called permitless carry? Thank you.
So this will be the very first question where I also answer, like I said to you before, I don't have the answer for every question. But I'll tell you, here's what I believe about that. I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I have a carry permit. I believe that the Second Amendment is about protecting ourselves and about the right to bear arms. It's not about hunting. And that's what I believe. Now, philosophically, I don't like government intervention in any decision in my life, or let's just say the less government intervention in my life, the better. But because I don't have all the answers, and I'm not the expert, and I don't think I know everything there is to know, I've decided to ask specifically about that question people all across this state. So every sheriff that I meet with, every police chief that I meet with, every citizen group that I meet with, I'm asking them specifically, how do you feel about constitutional carry and why? Because I want to know, I want to know what law enforcement thinks about constitutional carry, because they have an insight about that I don't have. And I want to know what citizens groups, I want to know what the NRA thinks about it, I want to know what everyone interested in that subject thinks about it before I come out and say, this is how I feel about it. Now, that may not be what you want to hear, but you need to know you're talking to a guy who is very interested in knowing what I believe about that issue before I just spout off what my philosophical view is on it. And then when I do make a decision about that, you'll know exactly what it is, and it'll be definitive.
Thank you. Got one here.
When you talk about education, of course, everybody wants better education, but how they go about it is totally different. Most people like to pour more money into it, etc., which is failed, and it's failed everywhere. What do you think a 100% voucher system to get the decisions back in the parents' hands, where they could send their kid anywhere they want to go, private or parochial, even homeschool or public school, whatever? To me, that's the answer, where you get the free market back into the school system and get the parent making the decision, not the state.
So I think, let me just say that my children have experienced homeschooling, private school, and public school. And that's indicative of the fact that I believe that parental choice and how kids are educated is absolutely invested. My kids should be educated in the ways that I think they should be educated the most. I do not think that one-size-fits-all statewide education policy is a good idea. I think that our system is in the lower half of all states in the country, and it shouldn't be. And what we've been doing doesn't work. And pouring more money into the same system is not going to bring about reform. I have a personal experience with reform through a charter school. My inner city boy went to a charter school and had a really different experience, and I absolutely believe that in his school district, for that environment, charter schools are a good part of the solution. But here's what I really think. Charter schools, public schools, private schools, home schools, vouchers. I think that vouchers are absolutely something that we should pilot and test in the worst performing school districts. Because when we do, then we're going to find out what the unintended consequences of vouchers are and the intended consequences. We don't want to create winners and losers. So we don't want to implement some program that we don't know exactly what's going to happen when it's done. But I believe that we should implement vouchers and that we should test them in the most failing schools that we have. Because here's what I really believe. There is no silver bullet. It's a very complicated issue, and people are afraid of what's going to happen to this system if we implement this, or what's going to happen here if we do that, and I'm afraid of that. I've heard that several times. What I'm afraid of is that we don't do anything to change the system. What I'm afraid of is that we continue to fail our students, and that we not try through education reform alternatives to what we have. Does that answer your question?
You've got one here, one there, and one here.
Yes, ma'am.
Over here.
Oh, no, sorry.
Sir, as governor, and with all the talk about sanctuary cities and states, what is your stance on that? I'd be interested in knowing that.
I think sanctuary cities are an invitation to lawlessness, and I would be opposed to sanctuary cities, and I would do what I could to make certain that we don't have that in Tennessee.
Bill, thank you very much for coming down.
Yeah, thank you.
I've got a question for you. It's not what you think it's going to be. It's not a policy question.
All right.
But it deals with policy. I'd like to go back to what we were talking about a minute ago with education. Nobody here, I think, wants Common Core to be in the school. It is alive and very well, in spite of what it appears on the surface in Tennessee schools. There's a law passed called the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, federal law. The federal law says in one of the clauses there that if you take a voucher that's funded with federal government money, no matter where that voucher goes, the federal laws follow that child. So if you have a Christian school, if you have a private school, if they take vouchers into that school, it becomes a Common Core school. And you have a choice about it, because that's simply the way the law reads. There's also part of the law that says if you have an operative school, you have to have certain longitudinal testing systems. That testing system is on a platform which is compliant with the federal government's platform through the Department of Education, which then shares that information with other people. So in effect, Common Core is a data capture system on our children. Now, here's what I want to ask you, not where you stand on all that, because the way I've just defined it, I imagine you wouldn't care for it, just from hearing it. But you want to be sure that I know what I'm talking about. So my question, Bill, is very simply, there's got to be a very erudite topic. Where are you willing to look and research, and what resources you want to access, and groups, people, whatever, to get sufficient information so you can make a good decision on these things as to how you're going to, what your policy will be as you run.
Where will I access?
Where are you going to go to access information to get the full story on things like what I just described to you through Common Core?
Well, I've supported an organization called American Federation for Children, and they are a school reform group that Betsy DeVos actually was the head of that organization. We have a statewide group here.
I know Betsy DeVos.
Okay.
And Betsy DeVos is part of the problem.
Well, maybe so. I'm just saying that group and its approaches well, go ahead and express that. I want to know what you think.
What I would like to see, well, she's poured a lot of money in Michigan into different projects that essentially nurture Common Core at the same time they say they're getting rid of it. Not that it's necessarily her fault. I don't think she really knows all the ins and outs of it. But I do know many people who are quite knowledgeable, very sane, very calm people who can get a lot of information. What I'd like to be able to do, if it's of interest to you, is put you in connection with some people along those lines and get both sides of the story.
I'm always interested in that. Yeah, yes, the answer is yes.
Okay.
And here's the other thing. So I've met with, what I'm trying to do is meet with people, like met with the largest charter school system in Metro Nashville, just because I want to know what's working for him and why, and who's against him and why, and who's for him and why. And I've met with the superintendent of schools in Shelby County, which is the worst schools in our entire state. We have they're the most challenging public schools in all. Partly because I want to know, what does he think and why, and who's against him and why, and what does he think about vouchers and why. I also really believe that teachers and principals are, I'm a guy who runs a company of plumbers and pipe fitters and welders that are out there building projects, and I'm the chairman of the company, and we're doing this project out there, and that plumber and that pipe fitter on the job knows more about that job than I do, and I've known that for 35 years running that company. That's going to be the case if I'm the governor. those educators, those people that are on the ground, whether it's education or talk about, law enforcement, meeting with sheriffs, and I met with one just today and said, you guys know more than the commissioners know. I mean, clearly, and not saying negatively about any commissioner of any particular person, but just the way structure and hierarchy works. So my approach to any issue like education would be to go to the ground to get information. And yes, I would open it. I'll reach out. Yeah, thank you.
Got a question right here.
Can I make one more comment about education before? I'm also a guy, because of the business that I have, that employs skilled craftsmen and understands the lack of skilled craftsmen in our nation and the emerging crisis in our industry for skilled workforce. I'm a guy who thinks that for the last couple of decades we've kind of ignored vocational and technical education in our public school systems. And we have, including agricultural education. And ag is 13% of our economy in this state. And the rural environment in Tennessee, we're probably just one generation away from losing a way of life for a whole lot of Tennesseans that if we lose it, we will regret it. And part of the solution to that is to have a skilled workforce in areas of this country, of this state, that would match the needs of potential industry, and that would, if we invested in small business incubators in small towns throughout the state, and if we invested in ag tech and in agricultural efficiencies that make us a producer of products that are more viable than our adjacent states that we're competing with. I mean, when you think about, I'm in the cattle business, why is it that Tennessee ships all of its cattle to Nebraska and Kansas to do their feedlots? I mean, why do we do that? There are things that when you look at the way we do agriculture in this state, you think, maybe because we've always done it that way, but there are opportunities, I think, in vocational, technical, and agriculture that's a part of that education reform that we need, which includes counseling for 7th and 8th graders, with different kind of counseling than we've had in the past. I could go on and on about that, but I just wanted to add that. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm a retired teacher. I taught kindergarten through college, and I was going to ask you about vocational tech. Unlike our present governor, who thinks that we should populate our junior colleges with retired teachers who need 60 hours in order to renew their teaching certificate, we should be populating our junior colleges with people, training people for vocational tech industries, such as Cisco routers, learning how to do networks with Cisco routers, learning how to do plumbing, learning how to do all those things, but at the junior college level, as well as have VOTech high schools. Put those people into jobs and then get them into the junior colleges. Also, I am concerned about, I don't know where Tennessee is as far as American laws for American courts, but I know that we have creeping Sharia coming everywhere all over the country, and I'd like to know where you stand on that, and what would you do to address that, because they're using our own laws to be able to creep this stuff in here, and we cannot allow that to happen.
I agree with that. I mean, I think that anyone that lives in this country abides by the law of our land, and there really is no place for anything other than that. So that's how, I mean, it's pretty simple, but that's how.
Got a question right here, and
Yes, sir.
Got a granddaughter.
Yeah, Bill, I pastored 2 churches, one in Minnesota, one in Montana. I taught in 3 different Christian schools in Denver, Colorado. What impresses me about your testimony about Christ and your relationship to Him, also the fact that you have been behind Fellowship of Christian Anglers. We had a Fellowship of Christian Anglers group in Minnesota. And in that group, we brought in young people that were not Christians, and we would mentor them in knowing Christ as personal Savior and how they will help them. That impressed me about you.
Thank you. Let me say one thing about just nonprofit organizations that philosophically, as a governor, it would play into how I would govern. I tend to think, well, I don't tend to think, I have part of my personal experiences have been collaborative efforts between public, private, and nonprofit partnerships. So Men of Valor that I talked about, the reentry program that has such great results, it's a partnership between the state and private business and nonprofits. The nonprofit is Men of Valor, private businesses like myself that hire men from that program, and the state that helps fund that program because they provide transitional housing. That public-private nonprofit partnership works. And, you know, actually that's what a charter school is. It's a public-private nonprofit partnership that works. And there are, you know, what I believe is that we have a profound community of faith through this state that is under the nonprofit world, including churches, is underutilized in partnerships with private industry and with the states to bring about change in many places throughout our state. And I think that, you know, it would clearly be an approach of mine to solving problems that when I see something like Men of Valor that works, I think, you know what, why are we not doing this all over the state? If it's working, why are we not doing this all over the state? And that would be, that'd be something I'd really work toward.
Got one right here.
Yes, ma'am.
Hey, Bill, thank you for coming. I'm an endowment member of the National Rifle Association. I married a New Jersey police officer who has more money than me, so he's a higher level in the National Rifle Association. So we are, I have to tell you, he's not just good looking, he actually came up with a good idea. As governor, you know, and you should know, running for governor, your #1 job without question is jobs. That's the 4-letter word that will drive your whole campaign. Now, it's very generous of the state of Tennessee to offer a 2-year community college, but Mrs. Rayland wants the kids that go to that school to come out with a job. And that's going to be to direct that education to science, engineering, mathematics, technology, or vocational trades. Do not go in at anybody's dime and take a liberal arts degree. You're worthless, you're wasting your life, you're wasting our taxpayer money and our lottery money. And I think that absolutely needs to change. So these kids need a future, and sometimes they just literally need to be railroaded into doing the right thing. They can either go the STEM route or they can go the vocational route. We need them wherever they come out. Because we need those jobs. We have structural unemployment. We have jobs that we don't have the talents to fill. You should know that as a big businessman. All right. So that's Pandora's solution for that. Now what my husband came up with was the state of Tennessee. We moved here because this is a gun-friendly state. We looked all over. We could have lived anywhere. We chose Tennessee because of our freedoms here, because we can own firearms. And we believe that Tennessee should be the gun manufacturing capital of the world. And if we can get our students to go through these 2-year programs and come out and engineer the finest firearms to be used by the greatest military on the face of the earth, and they can support our Second Amendment, we are going to win big. And I don't think we are pulling in enough manufacturers into the state. If they knew how pro-gun this state was, they would be beating on the door to come here and start to manufacture here. So that is my wish, that you will think about that and you will take action.
I love the passion. You have it. Do you know Ronnie Barrett?
Yes, I know. You know,
I do, yes. Yeah.
what a tremendous company. He's on the directors of the NRA Board of
That's That's right. My son worked at his company, and they live in the adjacent county to us. So we actually made our first stop. When we went to Van Buren, then on our way home that night, our first stop in our local area was at Barrett Firearms. That's where we laid out. That was on day one of our RV trip. So, yes, sir.
Bill, a two-part question, I guess. We recently had a gas tax, and a lot of people in this room were opposed to that. And in order to pass that gas tax, the governor put a lot of, one legislator called it a Christmas tree bill because there was something for everybody in that bill. He kind of bought off, I'll say, some legislators that might have been opposed to having a gas tax, and he reformed their attitude on the gas tax by adding things to the legislation that behooved them in some form or fashion. And he did that with the war chest that the citizens pay in taxation. So he used our own money against us. How do you feel about that in general? And would you support an effort to just have standalone legislation where you couldn't do that? You couldn't have all these add-ons on the legislation. You just vote it up or down on very simple terms and don't promise the moon to reach your objective if it's not what the legislature really wants to embrace.
Is that a philosophical question?
I guess it is.
Because I'm not sure that changing the way that you can define legislation is really possible. But I don't like raising taxes, and I probably would have done that differently. And I think it's important that we invest in our infrastructure. But I probably would have done it differently, and I would have done it differently. And to the degree that the second part of your question, which is, would I support? I don't know how to answer that other than to say that the kind of guy that I am and the way I would govern is that I would hope that we would bring forth legislation that says, here's the piece of legislation and this is what it is. Do you want it or do you not? I recognize that the way legislation works, there's all kinds of things attached to bills that go through federally and statewide, and so I'm not sure I can stand here and say I'm going to change the way we do legislature in the state, because it's not really a governor's decision to make that change. I honestly don't know how to answer the second part of your question. I want to answer it, but I don't know how to answer it. Other than to say I wouldn't do it that way, but I don't know how to answer it.
I just personally have a problem with using the Treasury to add on benefits for certain legislators or certain areas when you're using our own money to do that. And I think it's morally wrong and philosophically wrong. Yeah, I would hope you would take a look at that and address that. And the other question I just want to throw out there real quick, I think it's going to be very difficult for the next Republican governor to win office if they don't win East Tennessee, our region. We have a lot of strong conservatives in this area, and I think percentage-wise, you're going to find that a lot of votes are going to come out for the person who's running the best campaign for Republican governor. And Randy Boyd is from this area. He's got his business in this area, and we don't necessarily identify with his platform. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on how Bill Lee can win East Tennessee and prevent somebody like Randy Boyd from walking away with it.
Well, I can't speak for or about other candidates because I don't know about them. But I do know about me, and I know that that we have a strategy to raise enough money to be competitive. We've already started down that path, and we have a strategy to go to the corners of the state over and over and over again, and to tell people what our heart is and what our belief is. And I genuinely believe that most people really do look for the candidate that they can connect with more than the candidate that's from their county or their region. I really believe that. Now, clearly, there are, regional advantages. But I tend to think Tennesseans are looking for the person that is most like them and that can represent them. And Maria and I believe that will bode well for us. And so we are going to meet as many people as we can and be in touch as many people as we can and be who we are and not worry about who else is in it and who they are and what they have or don't have, and just keep our eyes fixed on the race before us. And we feel very confident that we can do that.
Real quick, over here.
Yes, sir.
I attended a Freedom Works event in Nashville a couple of weeks ago that's kind of on a topic more in the wheelhouse. Civil asset forfeiture and recidivism. General thoughts on civil asset forfeiture and how would you try to approach the problem with recidivism here in the state?
Civil asset forfeiture is a concern that I have, and I'm, to be honest with you, I'm trying to become educated on that subject as we speak. I know it's an issue. I'm concerned about it as an ever-increasing issue, and it's something that we need to be concerned about, and I need to be educated on it. That's what I'm doing. So I'm aware of that subject, and I'm aware that it's an increasing subject of interest to people, and so it is to me as well. Recidivism, recidivism is everybody gets out of prison. We all know that, and except for just a very few. And in the state of Tennessee, 61% of them will recommit a crime and go back within 2 years. And that is $30,000 a year to the taxpayers, and it's children of incarcerated parents who are 70% chance that they will become incarcerated themselves. And it's another victim every time there's a person recidivates, there's another victim. So recidivism is a really costly situation in our state, both in dollars and in human cost. I am a guy who believes strongly that people who commit violent crimes and the people who need to pay the price, and I'm tough on crime when the crime bears being tough on. And there are violent criminals and there are non-violent criminals, and there are drug courts that have been profoundly effective in changing the ways we lock people up. There are approaches to re-entry, like I talked about, where programming prior to people being released. We release people with no license and no way of getting a job and nowhere to live and nowhere to go, but right back to the very same place they went when they went in. And we have to do something different about that. There is a whole approach to how we screen people before we put them in. And sentencing reform, it goes on and on. There's a lot of work to be done on the recidivism issue, and primarily it's about how we re-enter folks and how we make it possible for them to recover and to actually be corrected through the corrections department instead of putting them right back on the street to return right back again to the same situation they were in.
We have another one right here.
I'm fairly new to Tennessee, and I'm still learning a lot about it. And like others here, we moved to Tennessee for great reasons. You know, the tax climate and other things. But what I didn't think about when we moved here was how much poverty there is in Tennessee. And the fact that after Mississippi, Tennessee receives the most federal dollars in any other state. I have a problem with more and more free education, college education, and using the lottery money, which I understand is considerable, using it to give more free education when there are people on disability in this state because they cannot read or write. You know, we should be spending money on helping those people, giving them help up, training them for jobs, and letting them be, you know, be proud of what they're doing and everything else. And I don't think there's enough emphasis on the poverty in Tennessee. And I'd like to know what you feel about that.
Well, I think the answer to poverty is to provide people with an opportunity to make a living and to not foster entitlement. But what we want to do is bring people away from dependence toward independence. And we can do that with work requirements on entitlement programs. And we can actually help people shift from dependency to independent, financial independence. And that will reduce the poverty level, and that's an important component of where we need to go. But it really is about creating access to that good job, good school, safe neighborhood.
Okay, we're going to have one more question right here, and then we're going to have to cut it off.
I'm going to bring it back to education again, where my question is, at this point, we have teachers at the elementary, junior high, and college level whose sole goal is to propagandize our children rather than teach. And I want to know what if you have a plan, some way to hold these people accountable, to better screen these people in the first place and get them removed, because our children are not learning math and science and social studies. They're learning all of the social justice and all of the garbage that these left-wing educators are teaching our children. And we've got to get our schools back, our colleges, our college kids are running around calling us fascists and everything else because they have no clue what they're talking about.
So I think that the best way to determine what our kids are learning is to push authority as far back to the local level as we can. Because parents really know. And to the degree that parents know, then we can determine what our kids are learning. I think that education requires transparency, accountability, and competition. And when we introduce transparency, accountability, and competition between school districts and counties and jurisdictions, when we introduce those, or when we be certain that we have those, then we'll know what our kids are learning, and we'll know how they're performing, and we'll know how this stacks up against that, and it will cause poor performing systems to rise to the occasion, because they'll be held accountable, and there'll be transparency, and there'll be competition, and that will change. So,
where would you stand at requiring teachers to take an oath, just like any other state-held office, taking an oath of allegiance to the Constitution to support the state Constitution as well as the U.S. When I started in 1985, I was required to take an oath, as just an exact oath as that, to the Constitution, state and federal Constitution.
I've never thought of that, but that's a very interesting thought, and certainly one I'm going to research and write down. Thank you for that.
Because the teachers' unions went to work pulling that out. But that's what we need. That's what we need.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, we actually have, I want to change my mind a little bit. We had some questions that were sent in, and so Bob is going to ask you a couple of questions from people that sent questions to us.
All right.
Some of my Facebook friends across Tennessee also want to know a little bit about you, and they couldn't be here.
Yeah.
So just some quick questions and quick answers.
All right.
Do you believe that people should use the restrooms and locker rooms according to their gender on their birth certificate?
I do, and here's what I think on that issue is that the less the government is involved in that decision, the better.
Let's see. Were you for or against the Insure Tennessee legislation that last year? And will you be against the Medicaid expansion in Tennessee if it comes back up?
Well, when Insure Tennessee was a Medicaid expansion under Obamacare, and that was a bad idea. And we now know it was we now know more than ever that it was a bad idea, and because Obamacare is failing, and it would just have made it more difficult to repeal and replace had more states expanded under that system. So now, until we know what the federal government's going to do with the Health Care Act, and it's impossible to say what the next steps are. So we're waiting to see what happens. But it philosophically, no.
What is your stance on in-state tuition for illegal alien children that came up this past session and is going to come back?
That's a very difficult issue for me because I'm a very compassionate guy. And I believe that kids that came to this country by no choice of their own and will be and might likely end up in poverty as a result of their not being able to be educated. So I'm compassionate toward that situation, but here's what I think is that anything that encourages illegal immigration is not a good idea. And while I struggle with that because, just a second, I struggle with that because I do think that there are some really negative consequences to having these kids not become educated and but I struggle with that. But until we have an immigration policy that clarifies for all of us, we don't need to be implementing policy that invites more illegal immigration. So at this point, I would be opposed to that.
Okay, we have one question from Maria.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
As long as it's not about me.
What some people wanted to know is, how are you enjoying this tour?
That's real easy. I'm loving it. We've had a great time. We were excited to be able to jump in on this RV and get to see the state and hit all the counties and meet great people like you all. And I'm loving it. It's been a wonderful experience. Win or lose, we're having a great time and getting to do something that most people don't get to do. So.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to cut off here because, as you know, we keep to our schedule. So now it's the time for the 50-50. We're going to actually have 3 prizes. The first one will be
Bill and Maria, thank you very, very much for coming.
first prize will be the 50/50 and $53.